And we are back with another episode of the Kyle Lanslone Show. I have a ton I want to talk about today. First, want to mention the sponsor of today's show. That way we could roll right on through the rest of the episode. And that is the Expat Money Summit 2025. This is a fantastic annual online event put on by Mikhail Thorpe and his team over at the Expat Money Show, where they teach you and take you through crafting your perfect plan B if you ever want to live abroad, getting a second passport, where you could buy property abroad, and most importantly, what your tax situation will be like once you have some foreign residence. So all these questions and more will be answered at the Expat Money Show. Now, I do want to say there is a VIP portion of the event, and you could get 20% off when you use the promo code Kyle. And I just recorded my VIP panel. Dave Camp, Jim Jardis are on the panel with me. I think it's an absolutely fantastic and insightful conversation with all the other great programming they have. Definitely worth the cost of admission for that VIP ticket, especially when you get 20% off with the promo code Kyle. With that, let's jump right into today's episode. A lot I want to talk about on today's show as we're getting into it. If you're watching live, go ahead and share it out, whether that's on X or YouTube. If you're watching on YouTube, subscribe. Let us know if you're in the chat, and we will get into the topics today. Israel won't stop. Will Israel go back to war with Iran? The last nuclear pact, and wrapping up with Venezuela. So want to start off here just by kind of noting and marking the 2-year anniversary of the October 7th Hamas attacks. Really absolutely crazy events that have happened then and since, and in a lot of ways it's changed political dynamics in the United States. But of course, the most important thing to focus on is the 2 years of genocide that have happened to the Palestinian people, and just how really insane it's been to see this occur day after day after day, and yes, change the perceptions of a lot of the American base, but no change on Capitol Hill, in the White House. Democrat or Republican control over Congress or the presidency hasn't really changed the U.S. policy towards Israel, even though every single day we see atrocity after atrocity. Now, just to kind of get into this a little bit, and I did want to mention this, if you watched or even read some of the good mainstream media coverage yesterday of the second anniversary of the Hamas attacks. Of course, there's a lot of focus on the tragedies in Israel, all the civilians killed. That was absolutely horrible. If anybody's interested in more details there, by the way, Matt Blumenthal was just on with Scott Horton and Daryl Cooper on the show Provoked, where they really go through in more detail than we are today, really what happened on October 7th, who killed all those civilians, what atrocities did Hamas actually commit, how much of it was just atrocity propaganda. And the truth is, all the main ones we heard, the beheaded babies, the cutting babies out of their mothers, the burning babies in ovens, none of that actually happened. Civilians were killed. Children were killed on October 7th. Many of them, it wasn't like an execution. It wasn't this horrific torture and mutilation in front of their parents, but rather it was just, the fact that Hamas broke out and they were at war with the Israeli people for what had happened for decades and decades and decades to the Palestinian people. And so since then, again, the mainstream media coverage is all really focused, and will mention when they talk about Gaza that 67,000 Palestinians have died. And it's really interesting how much the narrative has shifted on that number over the past 2 years, because when we first started getting reports out of Gaza from the Gaza Health Ministry about the number of casualties, they would all say, "Oh, those are Hamas numbers. How dare you cite those numbers? Hamas runs the Gaza Health Ministry," which is true. Hamas does govern Gaza, and so the Gaza Health Ministry is governed in part by Hamas. Now, there are also factions and just technocrats and doctors and things like that make up the Gaza Health Ministry. But we knew from the past that the Gaza Health Ministry reports and records and tallies the Palestinians whose bodies are brought to the morgue and hospitals and who are identified. And so the Gaza Health Ministry isn't just taking calls from Palestinians saying, "Oh, my child died, or my aunt died, or my cousin died," and they don't have names and they don't have information, so people are getting. None of that's going on. They're not inflating the numbers. They are counting the number of dead bodies that they receive at hospitals and morgues. And so again, while initially this was all, "Oh, these are lies. This is speculation. This is Hamas propaganda," now they're back to just reporting that number as fact, which that is the number of recorded Palestinian deaths in Gaza, but that is not even remotely close to the true death toll in Gaza. That doesn't include the Palestinians who have starved to death or have died of preventable causes, right? Imagine that, you got a father, he's not in great health, he has a heart attack, a stroke, or something like that. In the United States, they rush him to the hospital, they save his life, and he goes on living for some time. In Gaza, there are no ambulances, there are no hospitals, most of the roads are gone and destroyed. And so the problem that the Palestinians there are facing is even things that should be prevented, treatable things that should be prevented, like heart attacks and strokes that people do recover from and should recover from, they're not, because they're dying that way. But on top of that, there's tens of thousands of Palestinians who have been killed by Israel and buried beneath the rubble. So the number of dead Palestinians from the Israeli blockade, onslaught, genocide in Gaza certainly is in the six figures. Last year, a former guest of this show, Dr. Sidwa, put out a letter with 99 other American health officials who have been in Gaza. I believe he explained this on this show, but I heard him explain before. When they came up with their death toll that they put out, which again, this was a year ago, was 118,000. That was the lowest possible number that they could come up with. That number is likely many, many, many times higher, maybe into the 300 of thousands. And so when people say, "Oh, 2 years, 60,000 people dead," that's not a genocide. Well, that is important to remember, just the number of recorded Palestinians who have been killed. Now, on the, as we got all this going on, a lot of talk about October 7th, the legacy of that, a lot of talk about the 2 years of Israeli genocide that we've witnessed in Gaza, that the Palestinians have suffered under in Gaza. There's also these negotiations going on. And so I think I got this really good clip here from Matt Blumenthal that ties into the October 7th and why I don't think these negotiations are going to end up with a full implemented ceasefire in Gaza. So let's play this first clip of Matt's.
They'll never enjoy security and they'll constantly be at war. And then finally, and this is one of the other lessons of October 7th, because Israel has been, I don't think any of us expected Israel to still be pushing ahead with this genocidal rampage in Gaza 2 years after. Israel cannot be at peace for political reasons, not just Netanyahu, but just Israel, because it will lose its value to the US as an attack dog in the region. It will lose its value as a strategic asset to US empire if it's at peace. Like, "Oh no, we don't actually want to take out Iran. We don't actually want to, we're not going to fight Hezbollah. We have a Hudna. We're not going to sell you. We're not actually going to keep selling weapons. Actually, our military industry is going to be reduced." Well, then we'll reduce aid to you and you don't really matter anymore. And you're just going to shrink away into the region. So Israel, for the rest of our lives, will be engaged in this kind of war as it expands its secret nuclear facility at Dimona outside the purview of the IAEA, as it has been doing for the last 2 months in very aggressive fashion as it ramps up the Samson option.
Well, there's, as usual, not very much to add to what Matt's just said there. I think he lays out the perfect case for why we shouldn't expect, even if Hamas goes ahead, releases the 48 Israeli hostages that they still hold, living and dead. I think about 20 living, which would mean 28 dead. If they go ahead and release them, if Israel and Trump and everyone sign on to this peace agreement, I don't see any reason to think that the region is ever going to be at peace, that Israel is ever going to move away from this war mentality. Even if they do take a break from what they're doing in Gaza, a lot of the focus will not only be giving their reservists some time off, allowing them to get back to their jobs and recruiting and training new soldiers, getting new military equipment, but also on the West Bank and how they are moving towards ethnic cleansing, moving towards making sure the Palestinians can never establish their own state. As a result of Israel's genocide in Gaza, one of the consequences have been more and more countries on the global stage don't want anything to do with Israel. And so one of the actions they see themselves as able to take without actually shifting a policy towards Israel is saying that we're going to one day recognize a Palestinian state. And so Tel Aviv wants to make sure that that cannot happen. So I think this has accelerated their plans in the West Bank. And additionally, I think Israel sees, and we heard this rhetoric from the Biden administration. Amos Hochstein, an Israeli American who was Biden's envoy to Lebanon, who headed up the negotiations between, or I guess kind of represent the American side in negotiations between Israel and Hamas and Hezbollah during the Biden administration, was talking about how there was a historic opportunity to reshape the Middle East. And of course, he's not really saying that as an American. He's saying that as an Israeli, because this is about Israel gaining more influence, Israel expanding its borders, Israel destabilizing Iran, taking parts of Syria, parts of Lebanon, Gaza, the West Bank. This is what Israel wants to do, and they're in the process of. And I do think Israel and the leadership there view themselves as in this historic moment, this unique opportunity to take advantage. And so they are not going to take their foot off the gas pedal. It's interesting, even as we've had the situation, the taunts going on in Gaza, it's not as if Israel is ramping down its war on other fronts either. They've stepped up airstrikes in Lebanon in recent days. And it seems like they're trying to do everything they can to send a message to Hamas that even if you agree with a ceasefire deal with us, the strikes will not end. Because in November last year, 11 months ago, Israel and Hezbollah agreed to a ceasefire. Hezbollah has almost complied with that ceasefire to the word. And yet Israel, week after week after week, was bombing and killing civilians in Lebanon. The UN recently reported 100 Lebanese civilians killed by Israeli airstrikes over the past year, while absolutely zero Israelis killed by Hezbollah rockets fired from Lebanon. And so it's very clear that if you make a deal with Israel, they're not going to abide by it. And I think that's a message that Netanyahu is trying to send to Hamas right now by bombing Lebanon and by continuing the strikes in Gaza. So next up here, Trump is talking about his potential Middle East peace deal. Let's play this clip.
We are very close to making a deal on the Middle East that will bring peace to the Middle East. After all of these years of millions and millions, tens of millions of people being killed, there's a chance to bring peace to the Middle East. In addition to that, I made 7 other deals, and they're, great. And we're, things are happening with respect to Russia, Ukraine. That's one that last week, Mark, 7,812 people were killed. Soldiers, mostly soldiers. Yep. But 7,000, more than 7,000, almost 8,000 soldiers were killed. It's a crazy thing. I thought that would have been one of the easy ones. I get along very well with Putin, and I thought that would have been, I'm very disappointed in him because I thought this would have been an easy one to settle, but it's turned out to be maybe tougher than the Middle East. We'll see what happens with the Middle East.
What guarantees are you giving your Arab partners that Israel will not resume its offensive after the hostages are released?
Well, the primary guarantee is once this deal happens, if it does happen, look, they're in negotiations right now, we are going to do everything possible. We have a lot of power, and we're going to do everything possible to make sure everybody adheres to the deal. Okay?
So this clip is important because I think it shows a lot of really good insights into Trump's thinking when it comes to foreign policy and negotiating on the world stage. Number one, and I think maybe this is the only real weapon that advocates for severing the special relationship between US and Israel have. Trump really, really, really wants a Nobel Peace Prize. He wants to hang that thing around his neck and parade it around the world. That's why he keeps talking about 7 peace deals in countries that he couldn't find on a map, has no concept of the history of any of those wars that he claims that he's resolved, which haven't actually been resolved, but why he, wanted to get a deal done with Putin in Ukraine and why he wants to get a deal done in Gaza. He wants a Nobel Peace Prize. Now, when it comes to Russia, there's a really interesting thing where he said, I had a good relationship with Putin. Can't believe I couldn't get a deal done. Well, having a good relationship isn't enough. Having a good relationship would mean that you understand the Russian thinking and that you've thought up a package where we could not only support Ukraine, give Ukraine a little bit of independence, help Ukraine keep most of their territory, and also end the war with Russia. If you did have a good relationship with Vladimir Putin, I think he would be able to figure out and achieve that. But he absolutely doesn't. And it's just a good way of looking at his foreign policy and how he thinks about things, where he's like, oh, I got a good relationship with this person, that means they're going to do what I want. No, that person represents another country with its own interests and goals, and that leader has their own interests and goals. And so merely just saying that I like him, we get along, we're going to get a deal done, is never going to work. And I think he kind of looks at a similar situation with Israel, where he says he's the most pro-Israeli president in U.S. history, where he pretends to have this nice relationship with Benjamin Netanyahu. And I think that Trump honestly thinks that he could get a deal done because, he thinks that he has a good relationships and he can make it happen. The problem is he doesn't understand that Netanyahu, as Matt's just explained, doesn't want a deal. He doesn't want to stop the fighting. He needs this war to go on and on and on. And so again, the one, I guess, positive I would take out of this is maybe this is a place where somebody could convince Trump that, hey, your love for Israel and Netanyahu are going to be what prevents you from getting a Nobel Peace Prize. If you want that Peace Prize, you cannot be the most pro-Israeli U.S. president pro-Israeli U.S. president in history. You have to stand up to the Israelis. No matter how much Netanyahu groans and cries anti-Semitism and tries to use all of his little minions on Capitol Hill to pressure you, you have to stand firm. You have to say this genocide is going to end and the weapon shipments are stopped, or you will never get that Nobel Peace Prize. And it really seems like Trump has really surrounded himself with sycophants at this point, where, little gremlins like Marco Rubio, who are maybe their only real ability is kissing ass, has warmed his way to be the most important national security advisor right now. And if that's the case, he's never going to hear this message because as top donors and Israel lobbyists found out when they vetted Marco Rubio, he is staunchly pro-Israel. Now, next up, I had this clip of Benjamin Netanyahu I want to play discussing his view of the Gaza situation.
I think what we need is a system of a division of responsibility. Israel will have overall security responsibility to prevent terrorist resurgence from Gaza. But in Gaza, we need a civilian administration that is administered not by people who are committed to Israel's destruction, but those who are committed to living peacefully with it. President Trump has undertaken himself to head that civilian authority, to head the governing board of that civilian authority, and I think that's a good development. So if we have that, I think we can have a different future for Gaza and for Israel and for everyone in the region.
So the real problem here is Hamas's core demands are a complete and total Israeli withdrawal from Gaza. They want Palestinian hostages released. They want independent body of Palestinian technocrats to rule Gaza, and presumably Israelis not be a security force there if they're asking for a full withdrawal. So Israel's conditions here, I do think, are going to prevent a deal from getting done. It's very interesting that today, after the talks, you had Israeli, U.S., Turkish, and Qatari mediators all come out saying that a deal is possible this week. But I did read, this was Barak Ravidanatsios, and he, of course, is essentially an agent of Israel. You know, he is putting Israeli information into American press. So for that reason, he's very important to read, but you always have to read him through that lens. And he is saying that one of the main sticky points left is determining what Palestinian detainees, prisoners, are going to be released in exchange for the Israeli hostages. And I think he's pointing this out because this is going to be the excuse that Netanyahu tries to use to blow up the deal. But there's going to be several other hurdles that Israel is going to try to put in the way. I think the biggest one and the most immediate one is going to be Netanyahu is saying that he's not going to stop bombing Gaza until the hostages are returned and inside of Israel, where Hamas is saying that you need to stop the bombing of Gaza so we could facilitate the release of the hostages. You know, I'm sure whatever Hamas commanders are, whatever Hamas members are near the hostages, they are not people who have cell phones. I'm guessing they use person-to-person couriers or something like that to relay messages, not only because of the pager attack in Lebanon that happened last year, but also Netanyahu apparently has access to every Palestinian cell phone and forced his UN speech to play through that last month. And, I would assume after that point, they all understand that their microphones and speakers are controlled by the Israeli government and got rid of those cell phones really quickly. So it's going to take time. It's going to be complicated. There's going to be some logistical issues in getting the hostages freed. And if Israel doesn't stop the strikes, that's going to drag out. When that process is dragging out, Netanyahu is going to say, "Oh, see, this is Hamas. They don't actually want a deal. They were bluffing all along. They're just trying to get a quick ceasefire so they can regroup, and we can't let that happen. So we're throwing this whole deal out the window and just going back to the full-on war." If the Israeli hostages are released, I don't think there's any reason to believe that Netanyahu and Israel are going to engage in a long-term ceasefire. They're going to maintain the occupation. They're going to continue to kill Palestinian civilians. And whenever a Palestinian shoots back or fights back, that's going to be Hamas. That's going to be the excuse for the Israelis to go back in, to retake territory, to go back to bombing. And so even if this war is taken off the front burner for a while, I don't think there's any real sense that this is going to be a lasting peace agreement. Now, I have one more clip to play. I kind of found this one last minute here. Frequent guest of the show, Dave DeCamp, was on Timcast last night with Matt Gates hosting, and Kurt Mills is the other guest. So it was an absolutely phenomenal show for Timcast. And there's this one clip of Matt Gates that I saw. I really just wanted to play for you guys because it's absolutely astounding. I think it gives a lot of insight into how Washington, D.C. works and why Capitol Hill is so pro-Israel.
Initially, I resented the fact that there was no appreciation for nuance. Like if you asked any questions about any decision of the Israeli government in any place regarding settlements, regarding Gaza, whatever, you were like, you had deviated from the script. And I just, in any policy area, I had resentment over that. And then I saw the way the AIPAC worked, and that was weird for like a country lawyer like me. I remember my first AIPAC reception, and like your fundraiser tells you have to go, and your chief of staff tells you have to go, your committee chairman all tell you have to go, and you get there and you wear this name badge, and I remember there's a QR code on it, and what we were supposed to do was go talk to donors, and then if they liked you, they scanned your QR code to make a donation, like on the spot. And so this, can you just imagine how demoralizing that is to like be told that your job for the next several hours to go chat people up, hoping they would scan you like a can of tomato soup on the way out of the meeting.
I mean, it's literally purchasing.
Right. And so I saw that and I was like, wow, that is so freaking weird. And then, I was in Israel. I went multiple times, and I did not like the fact that I found someone in my room rooting around in my stuff that should not have been there at the King David Hotel when I came back to my room when no one was expecting me to be back in my room. And I just
presumably Israeli law enforcement.
I don't know who it was. I just thought, like, this is weird. All of these things combined are odd, and then the policy outgrowth seems to be an obsession about the Middle East that has not served my generation well.
So I think this is so important for a number of reasons. One, it gives a lot of support, while it's not the same stories to what Thomas Massey had said on Tucker Carlson, that, of course, viral, people aware of it, saying that everybody in Congress has an APAT person. But this is a group, I'm assuming, of Americans, but who their top issue is not the defense of the United States or the rights of the people of the United States of America. Their top issue explicitly, APAT's top issue, APAT's top donors' top issues is Israel and the benefit of the country of Israel. And our congressmen go to their events like call girls with barcodes on them to be purchased and rented out. Our votes, right? Our votes are rented out by APAC with price tags on our congressmen. It's absolutely unbelievable. It's disgusting. If this was any other country, if this was China, even if this was France, people would be unbelievably outraged. They would be throwing a fit. They would be demanding that each and every congressman who attended that building not only is thrown out of the Capitol, that they're sent back to whatever country is actually paying them. But it happens with Israel, and it's no big deal. It just happens. This is what's going on. If you bring it up, you're anti-Semitic. As Matt Gay said, there's no nuance allowed on this issue. You are either pro-Israel or you hate the Jews. And unfortunately, that has led to a lot of, I think, Jew hatred in this country. And probably a big part of the reason why, after Charlie Kirk was assassinated, so many people started pointing their finger at Israelis, Benjamin Netanyahu, the Jews, because there has been this increase in anti-Semitism, because they've been calling everybody with any criticism of Israel an anti-Semite. So that was really important. The other thing that I thought that was really important is he's just openly talking about how, you have American congressmen going to Israel, likely on like a funded junket. They're not going there on their own dime. Matt Gaetz isn't going on vacation. He didn't want to, a nice relaxing spa day on the Dead Sea or something like that. He was there to go to get lectured by Israelis, to learn about Israel. And while he was there, somebody, probably Mossad, somebody within the Israeli government, is sweeping his room, is bugging his room. I think he's talked about before how they found listening devices on their stuff, and how Congress knows that this happens when they go to Israel. Again, if this is happening in any other country, if the UK government spends money to have 100 US congressmen go over and stay in a luxurious hotel where they spy on them, then we would be outraged. We would understand that they are trying to gain leverage, that they want to control our members of Congress. And we simply cannot tolerate allowing a foreign country to do that to us. And yet when it happens with Israel, again, for the longest time, the discussion in the United States was, if you say that that's happening, even if it's true, even if you have former members of Congress making it abundantly true that this is what is happening, you're going to be called an anti-Semite. And so I think that the transparency, and to kind of circle on back to October 7th here, the transparency of that Israel is not some benevolent state in the Middle East, not some good plucky democracy just kind of pitted in the middle of an Arab Muslim hordes, and these are just theocrats and a bunch of Islamists and jihadists who want to rip off the heads of everybody in Israel because they're Jews. And obviously that we could all see that's not what's happening here. The Arab states have not joined in and try to stop Israel's slaughter of their brothers in Gaza. And so this is just obvious. I went a lot longer than I intended to on this subject. I want to skip, or I want to go onto this next clip, though. The next topic, Iran, and Netanyahu saying the Iran could hit the United States. This is absolutely
Iran
unbelievable.
is developing now ballistic missiles that are intercontinental ballistic missiles for 8,000 kilometer range. What does that mean? They add another 3,000 kilometers, and they've got under their atomic guns, in New York City, in Target, Washington, Boston, Miami, Mar-a-Lago. Okay? So that is a very great danger. You don't want to be under the nuclear gun of these people who are not necessarily rational and who chant death to America.
So we should all hate this man. Let me be very clear. If somebody is coming and constantly telling you that people want to attack you, people want to kill you, people hate you, they have missiles and nuclear weapons that could wipe your cities off the face of the map, and none of it is true, you should hate the person that is telling you that, because that is just disgusting, right? You can't make up stories about other people wanting to come in and kill you and wage these aggressive wars. And yet that's what Netanyahu is doing here. First of all, I think Iran's longest range missile is just over 2,000 kilometers, which happens to put Israel in the range of Iran's missiles, and that's about as far as they stretch. They don't have these 8,000 kilometer missiles that Netanyahu is talking about. And do you like how he says in there, add another 3,000 kilometers to that, you could hit the United States of America, as if extending the range of a missile is just turning a knob up on a dial. It's absolutely insane for Netanyahu to just, try to make this leap as if Iran's, again, 2,000 kilometer range missiles are on the verge of being able to hit the United States of America. But that's what he's telling you. And then he says atomic. Right? Like Iran has a nuclear weapon. Well, you just told the United States to go to war for you in Iran 2 or 3 months ago to destroy Iran's nuclear program, and then you are celebrating it after. So which one is it, Netanyahu? Is Iran going to nuke New York City, or do they not have a nuclear program because you destroyed it? Obviously, he's just lying, because the goal isn't destroying Iran's non-existent nuclear weapons program. Inexplicably, I find this absolutely shocking that Iran hasn't built nuclear weapons. I mean, look, I'm not advising the Iranians to build nuclear weapons, but I can't imagine being an Iranian general or any kind of upper level Iranian official and not every day saying to the Ayatollah, there's two paths. You could either walk the path of Saddam Hussein in Iraq, Muammar Gaddafi in Libya, or you could walk the path of Kim Jong-un in North Korea. Two of those countries are failed states that have had their entire societies ruined by the United States of America, by George Bush, by Barack Obama, by Joe Biden, by Donald Trump, right? Iraq and Libya, they have no sovereignty. Libya is an utter failed state. Iraq could be bombed by the US, Israel, any day of the week. The Iraqi people could do nothing about it. There's no protest. There's no nothing. The US could blow up a bus full of children tomorrow with a bomb in Iraq, and there would be no recourse. Iraq has no sovereignty. And so I just can't imagine that there's not serious discussions going on every day in Tehran about when are we going to make nuclear weapons, because understand that is the only thing that's going to prevent Israel from attacking. Now, what Netanyahu is doing here, his overall goal is for the US to go back to war with Iran on his behalf. When Israel launched the 12-day war in June, they knew when, before they started the war, before the first Israeli bomb dropped, that they could not win that war without the help of the Americans. That ultimately they knew that they would be able to direct the United States military into that war, or they were entirely screwed, right? They were betting 100%. They knew for sure that the Americans would eventually join. And as we talked about in the last episode of this show, Tucker Carlson has said he has sources that say Israeli military officials are just walking into discussion rooms in the Pentagon to demand this and that, and the U.S. get into this conflict, and eventually they drew the Americans into the conflict. That is exactly what Netanyahu is trying to replicate now, only this time they want to go all the way. They want I'm not even sure necessarily they want regime change in Tehran in the same way that I don't think anybody really wanted regime change in Libya. It's not as if they wanted to take Gaddafi out and install someone else. They wanted to destroy the state of Libya. And that's, I think, is essentially what more an accurate way to describe what happened in Syria as well, where it really wasn't about just removing Bashar al-Assad from power and replacing him with uh, Syria's Al Qaeda affiliate founder Abu Mohammed al Jolani. It was about utterly destroying the Syrian state. It's in multiple pieces now, right? You have sectarian violence all over the place. The Kurds are in opposition. The Turks have a part of the country. The Israelis have a part of the country. The Alawites are crammed into a little area, terrified for their lives. There's violence against the Druze and with the Bedouins. Like, Syria is an utterly failed state. And this is what, when everybody talks about the 7 countries in 5 years memo, it wasn't necessarily about just having regime change in all those countries. It was making sure that none of those countries could stand up to Israel and what they were about to do to the Palestinians. And while it certainly took more than 5 years for that to happen, it ultimately has happened that every country on that list except Iran now has absolutely no ability to stand up to Israel. Maybe a little bit of ambiguity there with the Houthis, where they did regime change Ali Salah, the longtime leader of Yemen, and they ended up with the Houthis taking power, who they can't get rid of, and a real thorn in the side of the U.S. empire for the past several decades now. All right, everyone, that's where I'm going to wrap the show today. Thank you all so much for tuning in to today's episode. Please take the time to hit the share button. Make sure you're subscribed to the show. We are here every Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday at 4:45 Eastern to talk all things foreign policy. I will have another great guest lined up for tomorrow's show, so don't miss it. And be back soon.